Einen schönen guten Tag. Wir begrüßen Sie hier aus der Hessischen Landesvertretung in Berlin für eine weitere Diskussion in unserer Reihe Was bedeutet das Coronavirus für die Europäische Union? Mein Name ist Christoph von Marschall. Ich bin der diplomatische Korrespondent der Chefredaktion des Tagesspiegels, der hier in Berlin erscheint. Unser Gast heute ist der Botschafter Irlands, Nicholas O'Brien. Und kleine Vorwarnung, wir werden das Gespräch auf Englisch führen. Zunächst aber begrüßt Sie Hessens Staatsministerin für Bundes- und Europaangelegenheiten, Lucia Puttrich.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich begrüße Sie herzlich in der Hessischen Landesvertretung in Berlin wieder zu einer Auflage unserer Serie oder unserer Reihe Was bedeutet das Coronavirus für die Europäische Union? Heute haben wir den irischen Botschafter zu Gast und in bewährter Art und Weise wird Christoph von Marschall wieder durch das Gespräch führen. Was bedeutet das Coronavirus für Irland? Wie sieht es aus im zweiten Lockdown? Was haben die Maßnahmen bewirkt, die sehr streng gewesen sind? Und was ist für Irland zu erwarten? Was wird Irland machen bezüglich einer Teststrategie oder auch der Impfstrategie? Und wie sind die wirtschaftlichen Folgen der Corona-Chance liegt? Wie haben wir das erlebt? Und wie empfindet Irland die Situation innerhalb der Europäischen Union? Hat man Solidarität empfunden oder auch nicht? Ich bin gespannt auf das, was der irische Botschafter dazu sagen wird. Ein ganz weiteres wichtiges Thema in dieser Zeit ist der Brexit. Wie werden die Verhandlungen ausgehen? Es sind die entscheidenden Tage und daraus wird sich auch dann folgern, wie das Verhältnis zukünftig nicht nur zwischen der Europäischen Union und Großbritannien ist, sondern insbesondere zwischen Irland und Großbritannien. Das Verhältnis zwischen Irland und Großbritannien ist schon ein Stück schwierig. Wir kennen das alle miteinander. Und was würde es bedeuten, wenn es eine harte Grenze zwischen Irland und Großbritannien geben würde? Was würde es für die Menschen dort bedeuten? Was würde das für das Verhältnis bedeuten? Und wie sieht es denn aus mit dem mühsam errungenen und gelebten Frieden? Haben wir zu befürchten, dass das Verhältnis sehr angespannt sein wird? Ich bin gespannt, was der irische Botschafter dazu sagen wird und ich hoffe immer noch, dass es zu einem guten Ende kommen wird für uns alle miteinander. Und die letzte Frage, die sich stellt, ist auch durchaus der Ausgang der Wahl in den Vereinigten Staaten. Präsident Joe Biden wurde gewählt, er hat irische Wurzeln. Verändert das etwas? Bedeutet es etwas für Irland? Wird es einen Einfluss haben auf das Verhältnis von Irland oder auch von der Europäischen Union zu den Vereinigten Staaten? Also eine ganze Menge von Themen, die heute diskutiert werden können. Ich bin gespannt auf das, was der irische Botschafter zu uns sagen wird. Er wird aufgrund der Komplexität der Themen heute in Englisch sprechen. Eine spätere Übersetzung wird erfolgen. Ich wünsche Ihnen allen miteinander viel Vergnügen, wenn man von Vergnügen sprechen kann, aber viele interessante Einblicke bei der heutigen Veranstaltung und wünsche Ihnen jetzt schon mal eine schöne Adventszeit und wie immer bleiben Sie gesund und hoffentlich bald auch wieder persönlich.
Besten Dank, Frau Puttrich. Ja, diese Gesprächsreihe zu den Folgen der Corona-Krise für die Europäische Union läuft nun bereits seit einem Dreivierteljahr. Sie können diese und andere Folgen auf YouTube und Twitter unter dem Stichwort Hessen in Berlin und Europa verfolgen. Heute ist, wie gesagt, der Botschafter Irlands bei uns zu Gast, Nicholas O'Brien. Wir werden Englisch sprechen, aber falls einige von Ihnen damit Mühe haben, kann ich Sie schon trösten. Frau Puttrich hat das ja auch eben gesagt. Das Gespräch wird auf dem YouTube-Kanal Hessen in Berlin und Europa schon bald auch mit deutscher Übersetzung zu finden sein. Herr O'Brien, die Einführung mache ich noch auf Deutsch. Sie verstehen ja sehr gut die Sprache. Sie sind seit einem guten Jahr in Berlin. Es ist bereits Ihr zweiter Aufenthalt. Sie waren hier schon mal von 2008 bis 2011 als stellvertretender Botschafter. Sie haben Wirtschaft und öffentliche Verwaltung studiert und den Großteil Ihrer Karriere im Finanzministerium absolviert, meist in enger Kooperation mit dem jeweiligen Minister. Die letzten Jahre waren Sie Abteilungsleiter Europa im Finanzministerium in Dublin, also auch während der Euro-Krise. Und zuvor von 2004 bis 2008 waren Sie Generalkonsul in Shanghai, kennen also auch China. Davor waren Sie Leiter der Afrika-Abteilung. Man könnte also sagen, Sie sind Spezialist für alle drängenden Herausforderungen der Europäischen Union, von der Migration, Afrika, über den Euro und die Finanzfragen bis zu China. And now let's switch to English. How are the Irish experiencing the pandemic and how are they coping with it?
Yeah, I think when we think back to March of this year, only 9 months ago, it's kind of ironic. We were actually planning our St. Patrick's Day celebrations, our 17th of March is St. Patrick's Day, and nobody saw this coming. I think people adapted very quickly and very well in Ireland. Sadly, 2,074 people have died as a result of the pandemic, and that's tragic. About 73,000 cases so far in a population of 5 million. We entered a lockdown in March, came out of it then over the summer, and went back into quite a strict lockdown about 6 weeks ago. And thankfully that's had an impact in terms of reducing the numbers down. We're down around 250, 300 cases a day. I think overall people are quite resilient, and they've responded very well to the expert advice. They listen to the advice, and it's it's not what any of us choose, but we have to live with it. And the big focus, I suppose, is on reducing contacts.
Ireland has higher numbers, if you count them per 100,000 per capita, than, for example, Germany. And if you look to the travel warnings of the Foreign Office of Germany, then Ireland is considered to be a risk area from this perspective. What are the reasons that these figures are higher if you count them per capita?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true in the early stages. I think thankfully we've seen, as a result of the second lockdown, we've seen quite a movement in our numbers. And pleased to actually read yesterday, we actually have the lowest incidence in the EU at the moment, 88.5 per 100,000. So that's quite a bit of progress just over the last 6 weeks. I think it came because we moved rapidly in October, and we've been working very closely with all member states, and particularly with Germany. And can I just say one thing in regard to this? We're so pleased with the solidarity, the working together. We saw what happened here with Germany about taking cases from other member states. But just to give you a simple example, we were short of the agent which you need to carry out these tests in the very early stages in March. And we spoke to our friends and colleagues here in Berlin, and they agreed that we can actually bring free fly tests here. So when we actually have a shortage or we have a spike, we actually have a facility here that we can actually fly tests here. And that's working together with Germany and with other colleagues.
That is good to hear that there is this experience of solidarity. At the moment, Ireland has very strict measures, at least until recently. There was an order that people... Is that still in place? How generally looks the situation in practical terms? How is the life in shops, in restaurants? And can family members from different households celebrate Christmas together, which is an issue which is on German minds at the moment also very much?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the second lockdown, we had different... We 5 levels, and we were at the highest level, level 5. And during level 5, people can only move within a 5-kilometre radius from their household. So we didn't actually stop people leaving their house or anything like that. It was just they were restricted as regards their movements. Shops were closed. Only essential shops were allowed to open, which essentially was foodstuffs. So non-essential shops, hairdressers, all of these kind of different areas have been closed for the last 6 weeks. Restaurants, pubs, theatres, opera, everything like this has been closed essentially for 6 weeks. So now we're kind of gradually reopening. Of course, there has been kind of very significant damage done to the economy, but I think people understood the need for restrictions. And I suppose they saw the numbers coming down, like every night on the news, it's the leading item, the figures today. So therefore, they see the impact of the restrictions, and that's why, because of the restrictions that were put in place for 6 weeks, we're able to open up. As regards Christmas, I think there's a realisation Christmas is a very special time in Germany and Ireland. So there will be a slight relaxation over the Christmas period. You'll be allowed to meet people from 3 households. So that is quite, it's quite a movement from where we were.
Ireland has a very different situation from Germany in several respects. It's an island. Your country has around about 5 million inhabitants. You mentioned that already. That's less than Berlin and Brandenburg taken together. At first glance, one might think the situation makes it easier to reduce contacts when you're living on an island, including the contacts with non-residents, with the outside world. But is that true in practice? Is it easier to reduce contacts in Ireland?
I don't think. while islands will help if you insulate yourself from the outside world, but we didn't go down that route. I suppose there's a few things like Irish people are social in nature, so there was a change in mindset. Firstly, internally, in terms of kind of encouraging people not to socialise. There were two particular issues, I think. One is we're an island, yes, but there's two jurisdictions. There's Ireland and Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland, as you know, is part of the United Kingdom, so they operated under the UK guidelines. So there were two competing sets of kind of guidances coming from government. So that led to spikes along the border counties, for example. But I think thankfully we're in a much better position on that. The second area is we're an incredibly open economy, one of the most open economies in the world, and trade is our lifeblood. So therefore we had to keep essential travel available, and we did that throughout. We didn't close our borders. We allowed flights in and out. Yes, there was greatly reduced numbers, but I think we also recognised that we had to keep kind of essential travel routes open, which we did throughout. Mm-hmm. That being said, we've moved now to the European system. So that gives a greater certainty, I suppose, for people coming from abroad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is one of the central questions which always comes up in these kind of talks. You have national measures, national responses. On the other hand, you need a European response. The virus doesn't know borders or doesn't accept borders. So every nation state is challenged, but Europe as a whole is challenged as well. And you already talked a little about this mixture between national measures and the European solidarity. How in general has this developed from your point of view from the first wave to now? Is Europe more solidary than it used to be at the beginning? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. If you look at the beginning, this was a major challenge. We in terms of, we all have risk registers and pandemics are identified on it, but I think nobody really thought it could be quite this bad. Europe doesn't have competence in health matters, so there was limitations regards what could be done by the European Union. But I think there was a very quick coming together. I think as well, and it's just my own view, I think when we saw things like the army trucks in Italy taking coffins away, I think that was a salutary moment, and it was tragic, and it was so sad just to see what was happening. And I think then there was a very clear understanding about coming together, working together. And if you look at what Europe has done, simply kind of the mechanisms that have been put in place on the finance side in terms of supporting member states, the SURE system kind of, and then this very large response funds. These things were unthought of, 2-3 years ago. I sat around the table, as you were saying, in Brussels, for the last 5 years, preparing meetings of Eurogroup ministers, and these things they would have been almost beyond our comprehension. But look at the way Europe reacted so quickly. And I think the real success story in Europe is the vaccine. Look at the way the European Commission and the European Council under the German presidency came together and saw like there was a greater strength in working together. And this is what they did. They went, as the European Union, they went to the pharmaceutical companies and they placed these massive orders to cover the European population. So often during crisis, it gives an opportunity to work together. And I think this when we look back at this, it probably will be one of those occasions when Europe did come together and work stronger together.
We are getting closer to the end of the year, and there's sort of an elephant in the room, especially for the Irish people. They have to deal with Brexit. If there's no understanding between the United Kingdom and the European Union, an external border of the EU will run soon through the middle of the Irish island. It would separate your country, the Republic of Ireland, which is part of the European Union, from the province of Northern Ireland, which is part of Great Britain and leaves the EU together with the UK. Are you still confident that an agreement will be reached that will make the transition smoother for all parties concerned, the EU, Ireland, and also the UK?
I think time is running out. I think we're very much at the end game over the coming hours and the coming days. I think just in terms of putting putting the mechanisms in place. I think we're very much at the end game. We certainly want to see a deal. It's in our interests. I think it's in everybody's interests to have a deal. But I think, as everybody has said, it won't be a deal at any price. It will be a deal which respects the integrity of both sides. I think one thing we have a very particular concern about is, regardless of a new deal, as part of the withdrawal agreement was a protocol agreed about Ireland and Northern Ireland and what would happen in that situation. We had two very clear objectives throughout the process: to protect the peace process in Northern Ireland and to protect the EU's single market. And the withdrawal agreement, the protocol actually puts in place a mechanism which will respect that, whereby Northern Ireland is part of the UK customs area, but they apply European customs rules in Northern Ireland, and you know that would mean mechanisms would need to be put in place between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This is essential in terms of protecting the single market. This was a result of long negotiations and compromise on both sides. The European Union moved in order to reach this accommodation, and we fully want and kind of insist that the protocol will be fully respected and will be implemented.
I think a lot of Germans, many Germans, are still puzzled that we are this point in history, but also that we have December now. And it's not only, as you said, about reaching an agreement. It's also a question of how you implement it, even if you reach an agreement within 4 weeks. And this hasn't been coming as a surprise. I mean, we had so many summits between the UK and the EU over the years. This should have been settled in summer, the latest, and still here we are. So it's a little bit also a psychological question. How do the British tick? I mean, you Irish have been living with them much closer than we Germans over the years and the centuries, I could even say. So how do they tick with regard to the continent, to the EU? How closely or not so closely won't they be connected with EU, Europe after Brexit?
Yeah, I think it's probably a complicated issue. I think it's probably fair to say that we joined in 1973. We joined the European Union to get together with the UK and Denmark, and can I say it was a great move for us. I think one of the best things we ever did. But I think what the British approach has probably been certainly it's been discussed continuously. I think in the UK. Some of the UK would see it as more of a kind of an economic relationship with clear limitations. I think others in the European Union would see it as a political project. And there has been that tension over the years, and we would regularly see it in the British media, and it surfaced then, I think, particularly in 2016. I think if you ask me, I think the European Union is the greatest peace project the world has ever seen. I think for a country like Ireland, as I was saying, it's been a great experience. It always strikes me when I spent the last 5 years in Brussels every 2 weeks, sitting around the table, and it was always a source of great pride to me, and I thought it was a fabulous experience and an expression of our sovereignty. That I was sitting there with 1% of the population, and people listened. Like I could speak the German, the French, the Polish, the Italian, the Slovenian colleagues. We all made our contributions, and everybody, of course, there's just different sizes. We don't be naive about that. But I think there's a respect there, and it's a sharing of our sovereignty. And by pooling that sovereignty, I think we became stronger. And we see it in the pandemic, what I was talking about, coming together. It gives you greater purchasing power, buying the vaccine from the pharmaceutical companies. And I think the British have probably had a slightly different perspective on that. I think, though, going forward, no matter what the outcome is over the coming days, there's still the question of geography. The UK and the EU are literally sitting side by side. Massive trade links, people-to-people links, German companies employing people in Britain, British people employing people in Germany. So the links are there. So we're going to have to work together, no matter what the outcome now is. So yes, it has been going on. It's been going on a very long time, but I think we're very definitely at the end game now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I listen to you, it seems Europe is a work in progress, but it's not always a consensus. What is progress and what is a step back? And you can see that not only with the Irish question, since you talked about 73 when the Irish, the UK and Denmark joined the European Union, and then it was a step forward for the peace process also in Ireland. And now when the UK is leaving, it seems that the peace process in Ireland is endangered again. And the same is maybe a little bit true when you look at other conflicts. Apart from Corona and Brexit, the EU faces a multitude of challenges. We have mass migration, we have the budget and the rule of law. We have conflicts with foreign powers such as China, Russia and Turkey. Let's start with the latest dispute, which is the link between Corona aid and the rule of law. In response to the economic consequences of the crisis, the EU Commission has launched a double aid program worth almost 2 trillion euros, 700 billion in emergency aid plus a 1.1 trillion budget over the next 7 years. These are sums that have never been available in the EU budget before. The EU has to take out debts several times the amount of an annual budget. Hungary and Poland are now threatening to block this aid package if the rule of law mechanism goes so far that they can expect grants to be cut. What is your reaction?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the point I made earlier is that agreement on a fund of this size is unprecedented. I think like any club, any Verein in Germany, there are rules of the game. And I think equally there are rules of the game around the rule of law. Ireland strongly supports the rule of law provisions. They're there for a reason. When agreement was reached on the MFF and the recovery fund, I think people should bear in mind that was a compromise.
MFF, we maybe have to explain that's a multilateral budget of the EU.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a 7-year budget. It sets the framework for the next 7 years. It's called the multi-annual financial framework. And in addition to that, there was a recovery fund agreed, which will be, 750 billion. So these are enormous amounts of money. And yes, there are rules of the game, there are rules around disbursement. There were compromises made in terms of reaching agreement about what the provisions around rule of law will be. We want to see them implemented. We support the German presidency in trying to find a way forward on this. I think again, time is very short. The economic cost of the pandemic and the economic damage has been fairly spectacular. So therefore, Europe is willing to respond to this, to assist member states in how they respond. Excuse me. So we need to get this fund up and running quickly, and we need to move beyond this barrier around rule of law. We look forward to working together, with the German presidency. I think the presidency is very much looking forward to delivering this by the end of the year.
This dispute around the rule of law is a little bit also about the political difference. In the west of the European Union, and certainly in Germany, many claim that it is a clear thing that Poland and Hungary are violating basic principles of democracy and the rule of law. And you talked about the rules of a club which everybody has to abide to. On the other hand, it's not so clear as with, let's say, the Stability Pact of the Eurozone. Everybody can look into the statistics and knows whether somebody meets the Maastricht criteria or does not meet. It's not that easy with rule of law. There is no clear catalog of criteria how a judicial system has to be organized. And then you say, well, that's a rule of law and this is not rule of law. Isn't that rather a political judgment?
I think in any of these situations, yes, somebody has to reach an evaluation, a judgment, and there was a commission assessment carried out, and they reached their conclusions, and we support that process. And again, it's of course nobody likes being judged, being evaluated. We've all had situations. We've had our issues. in different areas. For example, if
taxes, for example.
Yeah, well, I would say we have slightly different perspectives, but taxation is very clear in that it's a member state's right, and kind of and that's why there are certain protections built into the treaty. That they're not kind of just side agreements. There are very clear agreements set out in the treaty about how taxation works, and we've made enormous strides in the last 5 years in terms of updating our taxation code. But as regards the values-based system, I think there are certain values which are associated with the European Union, and that's what we want to see respected.
Mm-hmm. What do you expect to happen now in the coming weeks? Do you expect rather a compromise that might reduce the conditionality between the aid package and the rule of law? Or do you expect that the Corona aid will not flow because Poland and Hungary are maintaining their threat of veto?
Yeah. Very difficult to make predictions about something like this, but I think I would go back to the European Council, which agreed this package, and remember that it was a compromise there, that other people made movements, in the other direction in terms of accommodating, and I suppose just in that spirit of trying to find a compromise. So therefore, I think reopening packages which have already been agreed is a very dangerous process, because I think everybody else will bring back to the table what they already compromised on.
Mm-hmm. But the compromise wouldn't probably rather be, if there is a compromise, about how you execute the rule of law mechanism, where will be the judgment? Has the Parliament a say? Is it rather the Council, the European Council of Governments, or should one find a way to go away from this political judgment to a more judicial judgment? Let's say the European Court has to decide or something like that. So certainly, I think you're right. The aid package will not be unpacked. That would be foolish, because it took months to get something like that together. But where do you see the field where compromise should be looked for and maybe reached?
The package was a compromise, but the conditions associated with the package were also a compromise. And I think some other member states made moves, let's say, in the direction of other member states on the rule of law question, in order to reach a compromise. So I think if the package is reopened, I think other people will definitely put their issues back on the table as well.
Mm-hmm. Another point of contention is the migration pact at the moment. Many migrants come from Africa, a continent you know well. The EU at the moment tries to balance the acceptance of people who need asylum with increased deportation of those migrants who are not politically persecuted. The countries that do not want to take part in a distribution of refugees, that is a proposal at the moment, should make the deportation more effective. Do you think that can work? Countries like Hungary and Poland are more responsible for deportation, and others are more responsible to accepting asylum seekers?
Yeah. This is a very sensitive, very, very political issue, and I think people have strongly held views on both sides of the argument. I think our position is we welcome the Commission proposal. It's a way to try and kind of unblock this and move this forward and make progress on this. Ireland is outside the Schengen area, the free travel area, so we actually opt in and agree to take refugees on a case-by-case basis. But I think as well, it's also about showing strong solidarity, particularly to the frontline states who've had a very difficult time. So I think the Commission's proposal, people can argue the rights and wrongs of it, but I think at least it's a genuine effort to try and unblock and make progress on this.
Let's, before we end, look to the wider world. Other current topics are how to deal with China, with Russia and Turkey. Does the EU, in general terms, has to learn to enforce its interests much more robustly than it did until now, for example, when the EU deals with China?
The European Union is based on a system of values, and yes, I think we need to project those values on the world stage. I think as well it's an iterative process. We now have tools and mechanisms available in the foreign policy area which we didn't have 20 years ago. I think Europe is going better at this. I think the world has become a more challenging environment, and probably with that, I think people are forced to think a little bit more about how exactly they portray the values. So I think we've become stronger on that. We want to engage with China. It's in everybody's interest, second largest economy in the world. It's an important partner, but I think our interlocutors have to respect our values as well. And we want certain things as regards an international rules-based order. We want certain values respected around human rights and areas like this.
And a level playing field when it comes to trade and
absolutely, and investment and intellectual property protection, areas like this. Yeah.
Well, as a last question, a point which Minister Puttrich already raised, we had elections in the US. We are looking forward to a 46th President, Joe Biden, which has Irish roots. How does the Irish ambassador react to this this point of the game? An US president with Irish roots, does that play a role in the relationship?
Yeah, listen, we're delighted. Two of his great-grandfathers come from Ireland, one from Mayo on the very west coast and one from Louth on the east coast. And we certainly hope he'll be a regular visitor, but he has a busy job to do also. Listen, it's great in terms of having a friend in the White House. I think he's an absolute job to do as regards President of the United States, but he hasn't forgotten his background and his roots. And I think also, as well as part of the Brexit process, he's made his views known quite clearly. That he doesn't want anything which damages the peace process. So we look forward to working with the new US administration, absolutely.
I wish you much luck with this connection. The Germans were not so lucky when it came to the German roots of the former President Donald Trump. That was not such a cordial relationship. Thank you, Ambassador Brian. I think we have to leave it there with regard to our time limits. Wir verabschieden uns für heute hier aus der Hessischen Landesvertretung in Berlin. Am 16. Dezember können wir uns wiedersehen, wenn Sie mögen. Dann ist Belgien Gast in dieser Reihe. Bleiben Sie gesund, alles Gute und auf Wiedersehen.